what we are doing. I think one of the things I'm appreciating just personally and in the work and systemically is our need for connection, and that the dominant narratives are ones that we have to wrestle ourselves from, that say individualism, that say you make it on your own, would say, you're weak if you need people. Like, that is a particular ideology and set of narratives that we have taken to the extreme and have done their work, and it's time for them to go. We actually need more of the we, more of the interdependence,
yes,
more of the communal support systems to make things happen.
How do you influence popular culture in ways that elevate Black humanity? How do you build the skill, power, and wealth of Black creatives? My name is Gibrán Rivera. I am a teacher and facilitator, and this is my podcast. Here, I am inviting you into a conversation with remarkable leaders who are devoting their lives to the evolution of consciousness and culture. In this episode, I want you to meet my friend and colleague Melinda Weekes. She's the founder and CEO of Beautiful Ventures. She's a minister, facilitator, consultant, and a visionary social change architect. Ours is a joyful and inspiring conversation, and I cannot wait for you to get to know her. Melinda Weekes, my sister, so good to be in conversation with you. Thank you for saying yes. How are you doing?
What a pleasure. I am so delighted to be here with you. It's been too long, and it's great to be reconnected. So thank you for the invitation, Gibrán.
Thank you. I can't wait for our listeners to get to know you better. I was thinking, when did we meet? I mean, it must have been, did you come to the Interaction Institute in 2007? Is that when you came?
That's when I came. That's when I think first started to work full time. So I probably was around the edges around 2006, but 2007 is probably when we actually met. And so that would be, 13 years now?
13 years.
Yeah.
Amazing. I do want to touch a little bit on that experience and that beautiful work.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into who you are and what you do. But I like to start the podcast by asking my guests a question about a belief that they once held to be the truth, that they have changed their mind about. And the reason for that is, I think we live in a culture where people are only doubling down on whatever ideas they have, right? And changing your mind seems to be impossible, or like a violation of the tribe that you're a part of. And I just I like to open up with like, all of us get where we are by changing our mind, usually about something that we've held passionately. I mean, I could have a long list. I'm wondering if you have a good one.
Gibrán, you are holding no punches. We are just going to the root.
That's right.
And pulling it up and swinging it around.
Yes.
And eating it and throwing it back out.
That's what we're doing.
What a juicy question. So thank you for a little bit of time to think about that. And wow, I mean, this is the one that comes to mind for me. So don't tell anybody. But I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian. I'm clergy. Amen. I love the Lord. I'm, follower of the way of Jesus. And one of the beliefs, in the last several years, even after seminary, I've been really just enlivened by another way to think about why Jesus came. So the substitutionary atonement theory has gotten the dominant view of Christianity, of the reason why Jesus came was to die for our sins, to stand in an atonement, to pay the price for the sin of the world. And so Jesus took that on and paid it for us, and therefore we can have a relationship with God through Jesus. And that's just the way I was taught, and it's the dominant view of Western Christianity after probably the 11th century. But I've been introduced to other ways that Christians used to understand and appreciate the reason why Jesus came, which was not for this transactional piece of like, I need to take this on, take care of this problem, it's a problem. It has to be, punishment has to be paid, and therefore we can have a relationship with God. That's a view, but another view that Christians have held, a minority view, is that the reason why Jesus came was out of a pattern of wanting to be in solidarity with us. Wow. So even the incarnation, as we come up, upon the holidays of Christmas, the whole fact that God became flesh with us was out of a love ethic. The whole reason for the cross was to be with us in our suffering, right? And to be in solidarity with the thief on the cross, right? And those who are persecuted by the state. And that is the driving for God so loved the world that God gave God's self in solidarity with us. And so that gives way for more of a continual transformational understanding of God as I am the beloved of God, not the object of God's condemnation that has something wrong with me, but it's because I am God's beloved that God wants to be connected and reconnected and be in solidarity with me. Blew my mind.
I got goosebumps all over.
Oh my gosh.
I knew that I wanted to get into faith with you today. I didn't know that we were going to just start there. I want to let our listeners know that we're going to talk beautiful ventures. We're going to talk facilitation. We're going to talk. But I want to get into this because you brought it and it's here right now.
Asked.
Yes.
This is my truth. Yeah.
I like it so much as you know. I don't know if all of our listeners know.
Sure.
But I grew up in a very powerful Christian community. In fact, it might be more familiar and easier to understand now because I grew up in a community that was structured and practiced very much like that of the new Supreme Court Justice of the United States.
Yes.
The kind of,
absolutely. Yes.
I grew up in the similar, like charismatic, Catholic, like an evangelical kind of tinge, but Catholic and like very intense communal.
Yes.
And experience all the faults of that, but also all the beauty and goodness of that. So I can get into Jesus with you.
Absolutely.
And my son's middle name, his first name is Darshan, which is a Sanskrit word, but his middle name is Tomas. And it was a way to honor his grandfather on his mother's side, whose name was Tom. But I remember when he was born, I found, I think it was a Caravaggio painting of Thomas, the so-called doubting Thomas, putting his finger on the wound. And my interpretation of the painting and of that moment was similar to yours. It was like, why we give this guy a bad rep? You know?
Yeah.
What if what he longed, it wasn't doubt, but what he longed to do is what we should long to do, which is to touch the living flesh of the Christ, because that is the miracle, right? That incarnation, that becoming like us. So rather than see it as a doubt,
right,
we could see it as a deeper yearning and a fuller understanding of some of what you just spoke. So when you said that just that light descended upon me, and I just absolutely.
So and that's part of like my own, like, since we've not worked together like in the same institution over these last 7 years, with my own theology really being influenced by contemplative Christianity and contemplative and the Christian roots of contemplation and meditation as central practice, Christian practice around that. And with that, the ways in which a lot of, Western Christianity, has emphasized the belief, the dogma, what do you believe? And don't lean into the practice part of it. Whereas the practice, the embodiment, right? That Thomas impulse, if you will, to want to touch, and to kind of reconnect with the ways in which God wanted to touch us and to be embodied, in our flesh, is also where Christ is, and that is the Christ, right? The Christ is in everything, where spirit meets flesh, where materiality meets spirituality. That is where we find God, which is in everything, and we are part of all of those things. The earth, each other, nature, even physical things. So anyway, that's the bombshell. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. But yeah, but it really has exploded. And the part of it, and this may be a segue to the work part, what I've appreciated about contemplative theology and reading the scriptures anew, and a lot of the work of Richard Rohr, Barbara Holmes, and other kind of Christian contemplative thinkers, is that it gave language and gave theology to what my practice, my practice in justice, my practice in the movement, my practice in holding space for people in multi-faith, multicultural, multiracial spaces. Like I knew where God was there as well. But to your point, I couldn't experience that freedom, that inclusion, that liberation in some of these, in my Christian communities, who were a bit just, more respectability, more theology that is exclusive and that kind of stuff. And so the beauty of a lot of what Spirit God has done with and through me and in me has been a cohering of all of that.
So beautiful.
Where the theology and the methodology and the liberation, and it all is cohering together in one space. And that is the work. That is the work.
That makes me really happy to hear, and the resonance is very deep. A lot of and I think we will get into the work next, but it's hard to let go of this one because it's a place where you and I have always met. Part of what I'm teaching and bringing to my work now is this idea that when modernity came, right, the European Enlightenment project, actually what John Powell calls the European Enlightenment project of the isolated self. But but what it did, what modernity did is it took myth and it made it one of two things. It made it either a fundamentalist truth. No, the world was created in literally 7 days, or a scientific lie. Right? And as if we didn't understand, as if our earlier humans did not have the sophistication to understand mythical realms as other realms of truth that did not have to be literal, nor did it have to be scientific, right? And so we robbed ourselves of the main meaning-making structures, or of the ways in which we structure belonging and meaning as a people forever, before writing, before the internet. We had these stories we had to tell. We used to sing and we used to pray, and it was our way of our ancestors saying, this is what you all got to remember. Things have gotten hard before.
That's right.
Apocalypse has been through here before already. And this is how we made it through. And by neglecting those stories and instead either turning fundamentalist and closing down, or turning like hyper scientific and denying, or I think the other thing people do is they turn ideological and they try to get meaning and belonging from ideology. Which is dry. And so whether our listeners right now resonate with a Christian or not, I think anything that looks at these ancestral stories that have moved our people through the generations and help us take them, like seize them and turn them into stories of freedom.
Yeah.
To engage them as the ancestral stories and harbingers of wisdom that they are, right?
Yeah.
Especially when they bring us, like you said, right here to the body and to the quest for justice. That's a whole other game. That's a whole other game, and I'm glad you're playing it.
Yeah, I'm trying to play. I'm trying to be on the court. Just trying to be on the court with all the other players. I love it.
Tell me more about Beautiful Ventures.
Yeah, sure. Well, golly, and there's a connection. Beautiful Ventures was birthed out of the work that, you and I have been doing, sometimes together, sometimes apart, always, in resonance, going around the country, teaching people about how do you change systems and structures and helping change agents build capacity for that. I loved it the most when I was working with artists and creatives. But part of that work was also supporting others in making those kind of structural big changes, but appreciating that the highest leverage ways to actually shift systems is in the realm of story, of myth, of image, of narrative. And so I began to see that, oh my goodness, artists, creatives actually have a special role in this project, in this work of actually shifting systems. And particularly when you and I were working together more, and this is just like, 7 years ago or so, there was this either or. Either you're serious, you're an activist, you're serious with your analysis, and this is the way the campaigns work to change the systems. And then you got the artists and creative folks out there who are doing their own thing. And appreciating as practitioners that there's a both and about it, that really some of this creative thinking, this design thinking, this prototyping, this more holistic ways of appreciating what is happening in and through systems was needed to support some of these, advocate folks. And then, and similarly, the artists, wanted a bit more structure to help bring something of it. But I just saw that art, culture they actually have an advantage, I think, in shifting these systems because of the ways that they show up with an appreciation of the things that our systems are built on, which are these stories that we believe about the way the world is. So that coupled with, in particular, the first, at the beginning of the 2000s with Arab Spring, with Occupy Wall Street, and of course, Black Lives Matter, systems taking on big structural change, and particularly with Black Lives Matter, I was provoked, challenged, inspired to take on something big as well. I mean, they were unapologetic about it. And so I was really wanting to also give a space for my own voice and my own leadership and my own vision about what it would take to actually make some systemic change on behalf of Black people in particular, and to be unapologetic about that. So Beautiful Ventures came out of all of that, the work we were doing with Campaign for Black Male Achievement and others, right? All of that kind of began to stew in me, provoked by our colleagues and comrades in the movement for Black lives, and seeing that there was a lot of power that we had to actually shift the system. So Beautiful Ventures is a creative social enterprise, and our mission is to influence popular culture, disrupt anti-Blackness, and elevate perceptions of Black humanity. And we do that by supporting narrative change, but narrative, it comes from stories, right? So yes. Like stars in the sky that are related and become a constellation, related stories become those narratives, right, that uphold the way that we think that the world is. And how can you change the narrative unless you have stories that instead of are anti-Black, but affirm Black humanity? And how do you get those stories, but you support those storytellers? So we are focused on, in particular, building the entrepreneurial skill, narrative power, and generational wealth for Black story-driven creatives and their communities.
Wow. Wow. That is amazing. That's exactly the work. I think it was you, Melinda, that introduced me to the term griot.
Oh, okay.
Right? I mean,
Okay.
so there's some, and maybe we can, because you can,
Sure.
in some ways you're like picking up on that tradition, right?
Absolutely. These are the griots. These are the storytellers. These are the keepers of the memories, keepers of the ways and the ways of cultural transmission, the ways in which we understand who we are in the world, of identity, of meaning making, of carrying traditions. But yes, absolutely. And it's an empowerment project. It's supposed to be like a love story of liberation, saying that, wait a minute, there is no American culture without Black culture.
Exactly.
There just isn't. There is, and there's so much research about it. Nielsen does research on it with this halo effect that even Black consumers have about what we say is cool for everybody, and creates these trends and these market trends. And of course, we know, unfortunately, American until maybe now, but our country also moves global markets just in terms of what the American brand is of anything. So if you think of Black creatives as kind of the epicenter of being able to shift and move markets, the idea is that storytellers and story lovers, right, the audiences and the storytellers themselves, not just Black folks, but all of those who are in line with, in these values of wanting to shift this narrative, we could on purpose intend and work towards making anti-Blackness passe.
Ashe. That is so good. That seems like the exact point of intervention.
Yeah.
So much there.
Can I say one more thing about that?
Please.
Which is to say that this is not anything new. Mm-hmm. We are so inspired by our own ancestors during the Harlem Renaissance, mm-hmm. which literally 100 years ago, if you think about the Harlem Renaissance in the 20s up to 1929, was a time when Black creatives living in community in Harlem, their cultural production shifted the way Black people were seen at the turn of the 20th century, right? So, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Countee Cullen, W.E.B. Du Bois. It was art, it was literary, it was creative, it was theater, it was music, it was Duke Ellington. But they did this without the shackle of the white gaze, and it cumulatively, it had that effect and impact. I would say also coming out of the pandemic of 1918, and also was precipitated by this great migration of Black people fleeing places like where I am now in Georgia and the South, across the South, to go to places like out West, Midwest, Chicago, found themselves in San Francisco, and in places like my hometown of Harlem, New York City, in the same ways that we find ourselves meeting racial terror today, right? With the reckoning and the litany, unfortunately, of all these killings of Black bodies by the state and vigilantes. So the mirroring it also speaks to, I think, what the ancestors have left us, to say, we did this in an emergent way. How about y'all do it on purpose? And you do it with all of the things that we left you that can make it even more possible for you to decide that we're gonna flex our narrative power, our spiritual power, our cultural power, our economic power, and create a tipping point where it's just not cool to be anti-Black in popular culture and popular discourse.
That's brilliant. I want to definitely hear more about the sure. steps that you take to do that.
Sure.
But the work of Professor Sarah Lewis at Harvard comes up, and she's all kinds of amazing things. She's got this vision and justice curriculum, but she's looked a lot at the work of the image in culture, right? And she observed that Frederick Douglass was the most photographed person of his time.
Yes.
Okay? Not the most photographed Black person.
Right.
And so there was something that he understood. Right?
Yes.
About the power of that nascent technology, artistic technology, and the image. And we all, when we think of Frederick Douglass, we always say dignity, right?
Yeah.
We see,
That's right.
You have a
You're
powerful
right.
image
That's
in
right.
your consciousness.
That's right.
So this idea, right,
Yeah.
that there is a cultural intervention, right, that is happening in parallel,
right,
to the political activism, because he was certainly politically active, but that deep understanding is there even from then.
Yeah.
Even from then. So it merits our attention.
Yeah.
And so what do you do? What do you do with these folk? How do you support them? How do you bring them together?
So we have a kind of three prongs. One is network, three core services. One is to build a network of storytellers and story lovers. So you don't have to be Black to be part of the network. You don't have to be a creative to be a part of the network, but you do have to be down with our values, right? So it's a values-driven network of storytellers and story lovers. Go to our website, beautifulventures.com, see our 6 values. And that's the movement. That's my movement inheritance in terms of like, we need to create a consciousness community, folks who are like, we are together and connected around this, because when we are in relationship, in authentic, deep, trusting relationships, then anything I have, you have, right? So bringing, again, this network theory, building a network of storytellers and story lovers. The second piece is of that enterprise programs that help to support creatives who want to become what we call creative social entrepreneurs, right? Where they build creative businesses where the economic model is about intellectual property, where their stories can have a supported platform, which is the business that is sustainable to get out these Black humanity affirming stories. So we have stuff for folks who are just thinking about it. Like, for instance, we offered a negotiation skills training 2 weeks ago with one of our partners, Habitus Incorporated, and it was for creatives, community organizers, and entrepreneurs, right? People who, I went to law school and I took some courses in negotiation, but the hard skills of like, how do I actually get my worth in the marketplace? We all can use some more of that. And so we're actually resource raising right now for an initiative to help with build that up more for fellows, for people who are seasoned creatives who creatively are doing well. They may have won awards. They may be an independent producer. They may have done, a Sundance thing and gotten a Sundance recognition, or have just been in the game and are doing their thing. But in terms of being business people, folks who also want to build businesses that create wealth, not just for them, but community wealth and generational wealth, and create jobs. And so that's helping with the business side of what it means to build a creative business that is not just about wealth and businesses for you, but for the community and for generations, is what the second piece of our module is. And the third piece is to create a creative venture fund where both traditional and non-traditional investors, meaning people who have that $250,000 or above that you need to qualify to invest in businesses, but people who don't also can invest in kind of community wealth building vehicles to support those businesses. And so we're building it, we're cultivating an ecosystem for the next Harlem Renaissance. But very practically speaking, we have all kinds of programs, and we have a writers group that folks from we had a writers group last fall, the Baldwin Morrison Writers Group, people online across the country, but also we had a sister from Nairobi join and someone else in Jamaica. So it's diasporic in nature, and just supporting creatives who want to build, and giving particularly writers, because writers don't get the love. But writers, we don't have narratives. We don't have stories unless we support those writers. And so, lots of programming. We're really trying to build up our seed capital and our programming so that we can devote ourselves more to that. Because I'm doing that, but of course I have a consulting practice as well. But we're really we're partnering with a lot of great folks and looking forward to really building up what we need to do even more of it in the coming year.
That is so bold and inspiring and exciting.
Thank you.
I'm all about it. I'm really,
Yes.
really feeling that.
Yes.
Really.
Thank you.
And I want to ask you something. I've got 2 questions. I want to ask about the diasporic nature, but I also want to ask about narrative here, for example, because I really appreciate, or at least what I'm hearing, how I'm understanding is, a story that makes anti-Blackness impossible, which I think is perfect. And part of what's coming to my mind is, and I wonder if you've observed this pattern. It's been around for a long time, but it's almost like the story that we as people of color tell ourselves, or the ones that we feel we need to tell majority culture, that are stories that always highlight our oppressions, right? So, I saw a tweet from somebody once that was like reading college admission essays, and they're like, why is it like poverty porn? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you enter some of these spaces, and it feels like what you leverage is your victimhood, right? It almost gets you power in a certain way, right? And there's something there that I think I certainly have been a part of that at other stages in my life, but there's something there that I'm uneasy with, and I wonder how a narrative project like yours tends to that part.
That's wonderful, Gibrán. Thank you so much. I mean, there's so much in that. I think part of that is we have our own internalized anti-Blackness to contend with, which is why it's so important to create those circles that you facilitate, and to create a space like A Beautiful Venture, so that we can actually eke out the space, so we can be the subject, so we can heal on our own terms. And there's a lot to unpack and to interrogate that white supremacy has done to us inside of ourselves. So I think some of that is how we see ourselves, but I think more than that, it is where the appetite is. So I don't know if you, Regine Michel Jean Charles is a professor of French and Africana Studies. She's up there in Boston. She wrote this piece just recently about, back to your girl, Amy Barrett, and how a narrative piece about how she described her children when she introduced her children. And she has 2 adopted Haitian children. And she made note of like how she described her white children, like, oh, and Johnny is going to go on to be a writer. And, Susie, loves her dolls, and she'll probably be directing whatever. But then she described her Haitian children, adopted children, from the trauma narrative. Like, he came to us with hardly any blah, blah, blah. And they're like grown kids. And she could see her children, which I'm sure she loves, but still through this gaze of trauma as defining them, and for them to grow up hearing that, oh, my identity is attached to my trauma. So there's a way in which the appetite, the demand, the markets that are white supremacy controlled and gays have an appetite to hold us in that space.
Right.
And so to make it, you may play to that.
Right.
But this is the part where we have to be like, oh, no. Okay. So that we change the market. If we can change the market and make hip hop, whatever, make jazz, whatever, make all of these other, make Black Twitter, whatever, we can control markets for these other projects. We could do it on purpose and be like, oh, no, that's not cool anymore. Which is not to say that every story is howdy. You know what I mean? Yeah. But it is part of this liberation work that is about independence from the white gaze. And so one of the things as we are mobilizing resources, even from major media partners in this time of reckoning, who are throwing away all kinds of money for stuff because of the reckoning, we are boldly saying that diversity initiatives, for example, do not repair the narrative harm.
That's right.
What repairs the narrative harm is for our stories on our own terms to penetrate the marketplace. And that's what happens when you see people with the creative powers to do that. That's the beauty of an Ava, the beauty of an Issa, the beauty of even a Stevie Wonder. I heard a story about how he negotiated early on with Berry Gordy that he was going to have control over his publishing and not even have to answer to a Berry Gordy, a Black man institution, so that he could write what, and then he turned around and he wrote songs of the key of life. There's a way in which you need that creative independence, but you also need the business independence so that you're not subject to the white gaze and the gatekeepers to literally say yes and no, this will not go. That's right. So that's kind of how we're trying to make this intervention by saying that our narrative shifting is interlocked with our abilities to really be free. That's what we see in the Black arts movement, right? That's what we see in so many of apartheid. It's inextricably linked, and we're going to see more of these Black humanity affirming our full humanity. Yeah. Things come out when we kind of are untethered, yeah. Right? Untethered to some of these structures that are never designed for our humanization and freedom anyway.
That's so beautiful and exciting. What's coming to my mind is how in these times, like you looking at networks for a long time and the shift from what you might call a broadcast culture to a peer-to-peer culture, right? And so when you and I were coming up, there was a limited number of TV channels, a limited number of radio stations, a limited amount of space in the big box store. And so the market ran on the thing that most people, like the money was made on the 20% that 80% of people liked, right? And so that's how you ended up with massive blockbusters, or I mean, he's become more controversial these days, or like a Michael Jackson, right? It had to be somebody that could appeal to the mass market because the channel of distribution was so limited, right? But now what we have is this peer-to-peer markets, right? And so I've been really taken by the concept. I learned it from Seth Godin of smallest viable audience, right? Where the artist or the person that's making the offering, you're no longer trying to make your product that appeals to the mass. Yeah. Actually finding the people that you're absolutely going to delight, right? By being very specific in the thing that you're offering, right? I mean, there has to be a viability, but it's the smallest viable audience, right? Yeah. Which then actually really liberates you. Yeah. Creates something beautiful that the people that you delight will then be the ones to spread. Yeah. Right? And I think what you're talking about really goes well with this like shift in how we consume media these days, right? Or anything that we want, right? We get it more and more niche. I mean, we are on Instagram these days, and so you get the socks that are just for you, right? I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. Yeah. But just as an example.
Sure. Absolutely. And that's the particular becomes the universal, that's right. Yeah. And it's interesting because, I've been prototyping and incubating beautiful ventures since 2016. And it is very particular. And when I first I did a I don't know if you remember, I did a social venture charrette in Harlem in 2016, talking about anti-Blackness and how, and the feelings of what will become beautiful ventures. Nobody was talking about anti-Blackness in 2016. We launched, it incubated, prototype, did stuff, launched in 2019, last Juneteenth, to the world. Who knew a year later, the whole globe and all of the country would be focused on anti-Black racism in particular.
Amazing.
In particular. And so that's kind of an example of it bearing out. It's like, speak your particularity, have your vision cultivated, curated, understand it, have a point of view, and wait for it to resonate, or don't wait for it, but believing that it will resonate, building it because people are resonating and needing for it, but people that you can see that maybe other people can't see.
Right.
And like lo and behold, like literally, I've done the research. 6 out of 7 continents across the globe had people out there marching in defense of Black lives. Villages, hamlets, cities across the globe in defense of Black lives? Really? Like, okay. And so that's crying out for narrative change. That's what that is.
Yes.
Narrative change. Like, no, we know Black lives matter. Stop playing with us. Let these structures who do not believe what we know, y'all need to fall and let others rise.
That's right.
So yeah, so absolutely. Absolutely.
I can't wait to get more into this with you as we keep dreaming together. Yes. I want to also bring in the diaspora part.
Yes. Yes.
I'm from the Caribbean originally. I'm from Puerto Rico.
Absolutely.
I'm a fan of a theory or an assessment that says the Caribbean is more than that basin. It's actually a geography, a psychic geography that you could start in Salvador, in Bahia, right, which is the blackest city in the New World, right, or the so-called New World. And ends in New Orleans.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Sure.
And so you have this and there's something that happens there. It's like I call it the heart of Africa outside of Africa. Right? And I often say, Puerto Rico is an Afro-Latin country that it really is 100 miles long by 35, right? Like it's 100 by 35. It's a tiny. But if you think about the cultural footprint, right? And we haven't even said Cuba or Jamaica yet, right? But like just like Puerto Rico alone, the cultural footprint says so much about the way that African cultural spirit, right?
Yeah.
Just has this international reverberation, right? And so, I mean, it's funny because it was actually, I went to Puerto Rico the Friday after the Trump election, right? And it was Tuesday, and I just had to go anyway, which is really powerful for me because I could talk to my grandfather who passed this year. And he could give me perspective, right? Because he's been through the Second War and through the Depression. His children went through Vietnam. He's like, calm down, which is really helpful to hear from your elder.
Yeah.
I could also dunk myself in the Caribbean Ocean and just kind of cleanse myself.
Well, didn't that help a little bit too?
Yeah, it helped a whole lot.
Exactly. I know that's right. We're going to get to that too.
But it was in that trip that I turned on the radio and I started to listen to reggaeton again. And I haven't stopped. It has not just the
For years you haven't stopped.
Yeah, I haven't. Even yesterday I was facilitating, and that's what we did. We danced reggaeton together.
Yeah.
But that is an Afrobeat, right? That's taking the world by storm. I guess it's my other way of saying between the diaspora, between Black people here.
It's so true.
Culture, music, story. It's your gaze is where it needs to be, and I'm just excited to be in conversation with you around it.
Oh man, me too. And let's continue to build around that. I mean, I'm literally speaking about healing and the waters and the ocean, all of that. So much needed. The healing of it. We whisked away twice this summer during the pandemic to Hilton Head in South Carolina, getting into that Atlantic Ocean. But actually last April or so, we went to Puerto Rico.
Nice.
During the, the bitter, it's still raw during that time. Yeah. And it was just, just so healing. And I had been to Puerto Rico before, but not in a long time. And a dear friend of ours is the head of economic development in Puerto Rico. There just, and then some other friends who have since gone to live there, and just feeling a sense of like, oh, home. I mean, I grew up in New York. I grew up in the Bronx. So it's just like, yeah, these are my people. What's up? But right now, just even kind of really like, looking at, do we go to Puerto Rico, Jamaica? I'm looking places to do our long distance working,
That's beautiful. That's excellent.
And then, thinking Caribbean and
exactly.
all of that, because there is healing there. I spoke to a brother last week who's in the Gullah Geechee. He's doing the documentary about the Gullah Geechee Islands, right? That same ways in which we have retained our Africanisms and created, ways of being in other lands, but still there's this connective tissue that still is healing and powerful and transformational for us.
That's so beautiful.
So just trying to be intentional about connecting that and getting more connected to it. Even as I am a daughter of the Caribbean as well. My dad's people are from Montserrat.
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely.
I spent some time with the Gullah Geechee people a couple of years back, and I was moved to the core.
Yeah.
Moved to the core. What a beautiful culture.
Powerful. Absolutely.
Really
Absolutely.
Potent. Melinda, it might feel like a left turn, but a lot of people that listen to this podcast know that I'm a facilitator. They know me through facilitation work. And I know that you are too. And I have to at least ask you about this beautiful craft that we share. I think my question is like, what have you learned? How has your practice changed, or what have you learned? And I'll say this while you think, I'll say, and this is a net positive. I am in more and more spaces where people introduce themselves as facilitators. And I think that's a very, very good thing, because it means that people understand that the only way forward is through collaboration, and that collaboration is best when it's facilitated. I also think that the negative there is, you can just say that you are, right? And so there is a lot of subpar facilitation, to be honest. And I'm not trying to hate on nobody, but there's really like an aspiration to facilitate versus kind of the apprenticeship process, through which we learn the 10,000 hours in the room that kind of get you a sense of how the energy is moving and what is possible in any given space. And I'm just curious as to if there's anything you can share about your thinking about the craft. What are big ahas for you? How much are you doing it these days?
Yeah, thank you for that. Oh, this is rare space. Thank you, Gibrán. This is awesome. Well, I do want to start with a note of lament. I mean, I think I'm still in the midst of kind of just mourning the loss of in-person space. Like, and I know I'm being adaptive and all the things, but I really still need to mourn it, because especially as people are interested in being in actually having more transformative facilitation and to really doing some change in groups, I'm saying yes, or want to say yes, but I'm also like saying yes before I realize, not without in person. So I just want to lift up a lament around the loss of in person for that. Oh my goodness.
So hard.
Oh my goodness. Wow. And I think in just what's coming up for me in terms of facilitation, I do feel, strong and comfortable in that identity, to your point. Like, it is a thing, and whether or not people know it is a thing, more people are appreciating that it's a thing, and I appreciate this a thing, and I feel like I know I have that mastery. Not that I'm done. The whole point is that I'm continuing to learn. One of the things that has informed my practice more is just the relational component and ways and methodologies to enhance that. And to cultivate that in its own space as a precursor to real transformative change. And so that's why I'm taking this course with the Circle Way, with Juanita Robinson, Robertson. That's why I'm studying with the Relational Uprising. Cedar and Lucienne are my teachers and friends about relational culture and being intentional about those practices, those methodologies that help support groups in their interior life as groups.
Yes.
Is my growing edge, and what I've been trying to be just more intentional about learning and getting better and more facile with as a holder of space. And yeah,
that's
having
great.
a lot of respect and awe for that, and knowing that that's what I want to actually learn and grow more in as a facilitator.
That is potent. I'll share a frame that I've been working with, just because both parts of more than one part of the conversation connect to it. So sometimes I'm with a group, right? And we have that kind of, that sense of an emergent we, right? That is greater than the sum of its parts, right? And that's when you know you're in that zone. And so the way I explain it to bring our attention to it is, I said there's an objective I, meaning people can objectively agree when they see me that I'm Gibrán, right? Like that's just what it is, right? And then there's an objective we, right? Like you and me right now, or whatever the group that is gathered in a given space, that's a we space. We're all together, right? And people can see it. People can see it from the outside and be like, that's a beautiful ventures convening, or whatever it might be. But there's also a subjective I, right? Like the world of myself inside myself. Some of it I know and you'll never know. Some of it I'll never know. Some of it you'll know better than me because I hide it from myself, but everybody around me can see it, right? Like the subjective I. But there's more room for debate, right? Like an ex of mine can be like, that guy is horrible. And a great friend of mine can be like, no, that guy is great, or whatever. Like it's subjective. So similarly, there is a subjective we. There's an interior to the we, which is what you just referred to. And that's where the magic of facilitation is. And to tie it to the other conversation we're having,
I see what
also the space of culture. That's that, right? Culture is our subjective we. And for most people, culture just happens to us, right? It's like conditioned upon us. I'm like, this is what it means to be a guy, right? And I walk around. And unless the artist, right, the culture maker, or the prophet, right, or the enlightened political leader, who are few, right? Those are the people that take on the work of culture, that bring our attention to the interior of the we. And I feel like what you're trying to do is that. And I bring it in here because we have a culture that has paid a lot of attention to the interior of the I, right? Like you can talk about my coach, you can talk about my therapist, which is all great. You can talk about, people start conversations like, I feel, or what I need is, right? I feel like so much of what you're doing is bringing our gaze to what is inside of the we space, and it's momentous. It's
and what you're doing and what we are doing, because I think one of the things I'm appreciating just personally and in the work and systemically is our need for connection, and that the dominant narratives are ones that we have to wrestle ourselves from, that say individualism, that say you make it on your own, which would say, you're weak if you need people. Like that is a particular ideology and set of narratives that have that we have taken to the extreme and have done their work, and it's time for them to go. We actually need more of the we, more of the interdependence, more of the communal support systems to make things happen. And that's exactly, I think, the spirit of what you're also saying, which is like we actually have gone to the extreme with this other thing to get our healing, to reach homeostasis, to have some cohering of our whole humanity. We actually need to play more with the we, and to learn how to do that, and to relearn and to remember how we did it.
Right.
And integrate that into our present circumstances, because that's how we will survive. It's part of how we're actually wired to be in this world, which is in an interdependent kind of way. And so I think it is the work of our times as we sit here, on the cusp of the 21st century in this time of pandemic and change and turning. Like, that's what the pandemic is. We are all connected. We are all subject, to each other. So that is the work that I am enthused and excited about and feel drawn to and called to, together with you, my dear brother.
Yeah, it is enlivening to be in conversation with you. It is inspiring. Thank you so much, Melinda.
Absolutely.
It's beautiful. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for being a friend. Thank you for saying yes to the interview.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gibrán. Thank you. Thank you.
I ask a couple of questions as we close the podcast.
Okay.
And I ask as a man that has been impacted by patriarchy, that has caused harm through patriarchy, that is involved in a lifetime project of atonement. Somebody that's taken upon myself to gather men, right? And see about us becoming better, about becoming conscious in our masculinity. That's a big calling. And so when I'm in conversation with a powerful woman, especially a powerful woman of color, I make it a point to ask, as things like the Me Too movement expose something that has been there forever, right? It's nothing new, but they sort of really force us to reckon with the ugliness of it all. The question I'd like to ask is, what do you think men should do? What is your advice for men? What should we do as we seek to be better?
Wow. Thank you for that question. I think I would encourage men to get in touch with your feelings, to heal from your trauma, personal trauma, generational trauma that patriarchy has visited upon you, those hyper masculine and things that you've learned and narratives and ways of being that you are harmed by, and to heal and to seek that out, to become acquainted with the breadth of your humanity. And lots of times that is connected to being able to be connected to your actual feelings, which itself is a revolutionary project for men. And I think in there you will find more of the healing that will enable you to show up in relationship less toxic, more loving, more forgiving, more soft.
Beautiful.
That is my offering.
Thank you. It's resonant. It's deeply resonant. So I really welcome it.
Thank you for asking. Wow.
Yeah. I'll ask you one more question, and then I'll invite you to tell us where to find you, so people can know when they want more, when they want more Melinda.
Yeah.
The other one is, it's just kind of a simple visioning exercise. It requires some light touch facilitation in which I, with your permission, with your consent.
Facilitate me, Gibrán.
I'd like to invite you to take a leap forward in your consciousness to 20 years from now. You don't need to tell me what you see, but I just like to see, you need to consider what you see. Much of what you set out to accomplish have been accomplished. Some of the ways in which you want to grow you've succeeded in. Some things haven't come through or true, of course. Some things we're still struggling with, of course. As you look at that person 20 years from now, and the invitation is to kind of come back to the moment as that person and ask you, what advice do you have for yourself? And what advice do you have for us as the person that has that wisdom and that growth?
Wow. The advice to me from that person is to cultivate, just to cultivate the world, the family that you want, the relationships, the space, to cultivate it with intention so that it can be so. And I think that might be also what is offered to everyone else. The power of intention, creation, and cultivation in community, with your tribe, with your people, and to build something that has meaning for you and for your community.
Beautiful. Thank you, Melinda.
Gibrán, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. To be with you.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you.
And how do people find you?
Find me at melindaweekes.com or weekesinadvance.com. That's my consulting and moderation and speaking work. And then also find us on beautifulventures.com. Of course, IG, we're, Beautiful Ventures and Melinda_Weekes on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of it. Find me. Let's continue to build.
Ache, thank you so much. Many, many blessings to you, friend.
Thank you. And also to you, my dear brother. Love you.
Love you back.
All right. Bye for now.
If you got this far into the podcast, it is because you get what we're doing. We're not trying to reach everybody. We just want to connect with you and with the other right bodies. Do you know someone who would enjoy listening to our podcast? Go ahead. Take a moment and send them a note, an email, or a text with a link to the episode. As you know, social media is a messy and crowded place, but a few of your hand-picked friends will appreciate what we're up to. If you let them know, we can build community together. I want to shout out Audio Chemists and Austin Jade for their good work producing our podcast. And you, please stay awake and stay blessed.